Welcome, greetings, and salutations. In today's video, I will be making something for my father's birthday. And to make that something, I will need quite a lot of newspaper strips, which I just used a normal newspaper and then just cut it up in different sizes of strips so that I can use that to make a paper mache figure. I did cut a lot more strips than what I needed, but I'd rather have a lot more than what is needed than not having enough. Even though I cut out a lot of strips, some of the strips were way too thin, so I did have to go and get another newspaper and cut bigger strips, since the thing that I'm building is quite big and the surface area to fill in with the strips is quite big. As you can see here, I mixed water and flour together, which will kind of act as a glue to hold the paper mache pieces together. As you can see here, I'm using that green ball as a support for all the newspaper strips that I'm putting onto it, because what I'm making is a cast iron potjie or pot for my dad's birthday. And I will sculpt a few things that will look like very interesting things that most people would probably not eat. Now the first layer is done, and I was just adding more and more layers onto it to make sure that it is strong enough to hold everything that's going to be on it and on top of it and even in it. So I was just adding more and more layers to make sure that it was strong and supported. And you can probably think that my hands were quite dirty and sticky because of, the glue, quote unquote, that I used for all of this. My heart did skip a beat because it was a bit stuck on the bowl, so I had to pull it up, and I wanted to make sure that it didn't break, because if it ripped, then I would have had to try and fix it. And to try and fix it means adding more layers and more time to dry. The first time I took it off, I did notice it was a lot shorter than what I thought it was going to be, and I needed to be quite a lot of more taller than what it is now. I first wanted to taste something, which I just put a very thin layer of that glue and then a pieces of toilet paper on top of that to kind of make a very crinkly texture. I was glad that it worked, because otherwise I would have had to find another way to add texture to the pot. So I'm glad that it worked. But this is just a test and it will get removed anyways, because if you add paper mache onto that, the paper kind of lifts. To make the pot taller, I did decide to use wire as a support, because otherwise the sides would fall into themselves and break very easily. And in my opinion, this process of making a wire structure is one of the funnest things to do for me in such projects. After the wire structure is built, it is back to paper mache. I will say adding the paper mache this way was a lot easier than adding the paper mache on the bottom. It went quicker and it was a lot easier because the paper mache didn't come off of each other. And I did add a thicker layer of the quote-unquote glue that I used in the inside to make sure that all the pieces are just stuck together and flat and aren't lifting up. Okay, so now that this is done and it's strong enough to hold something, I'm going to do exactly what I did over here over these. I will probably just take the toilet paper and just put it over, just to make sure that all these loose pieces are, stuck together and won't open when it's complete. I did this part. The bottom isn't done yet, But I first need to let this dry and see if it sticks or if my mixture that is in there is too thin. So I'm gonna let this dry and then I'm gonna come back to it tomorrow night or today's night, it depends. As you could probably hear, those words that I just said was done while I was building the thing and it wasn't a voiceover, so I've never tried that. Don't know why I've never tried it, I was always just too scared to do it, so hopefully it doesn't sound too strange. Here I'm trying to make a side that will bend around a more or less circle because the pot is still too short. So I'm having to create a extension of the pot so that it would be tall enough to hold everything that's going to go inside it. Because I used a thicker glue here than what I did on the other paper mache pieces, the smell that came off of this thing was quite bad and I couldn't take it to the outside because I had to keep it a secret. So it was stuck in my room for a few days.
Is that too much sandstone? What? I might get some other Tunex rubber here. I need to figure out how to get the condensation, which I could use different color of wood. Should I do birch? No, not birch. Should I do birch? Sounds like a building school project if I ever heard one. Yeah.
There you could see that I made a few markings on the side piece just to make sure that I knew where to put the top because I wanted to add a few things to make it look like an actual pot that has some food in it. So I had to make sure that there was kind of a indent on the top, but not too much to make it look like there's nothing inside or to make it less space than what I need because there's a lot of things that I need to put inside it. And that line that you see there is where I need to cut it because it was a bit too tall. I didn't need it to be that tall. So I did have to cut it there to make it a bit shorter. And after I cut it a bit shorter, I did exactly what I did on the other piece, which is adding texture by putting down a thin layer of the quote-unquote glue and adding toilet paper on top of that to make a kind of crinkly texture. And here you can see what I mean by the crinkly texture, and it is quite wet and it comes easily off as you can see here. And I had to put this aside to make it sure that it's dry.
It looks kind of like cabinetry though, and I'm not sure if I want to use cabinetry for.
Now that most of the structure is done, I'm starting to work on the details, which the first detail that I'm working on is the legs of the pot. As you can see, I wanted to use polystyrene for it because I could shape it easily in the shape that I wanted it to be.
This one?
After I cut the legs, I hot glued them to the pot. That was a bit of a struggle because the hot glue eats away the polystyrene, so I had to make sure that I didn't put too much of the hot glue on top of the legs. Otherwise, they would just disappear. Okay, so I painted this part, but I'm literally just gonna go and paint the whole thing brown. So yeah, I just wanted to show you kind of what the texture will be since, you know, those things are quite textured and stuff. So I'm literally just gonna paint this whole thing brown and the other part here too, and probably the inside. So yeah. Okay, so I painted these brown, but now I have to paint them black. I just painted them brown to make sure that some of the white spots that's like most visible is covered. Now I can paint them black and then I'm just gonna give them a white wash. And those things are quite simple and I've done them a few times on the channel, so I'm not gonna show them too much. But after that, I started to work on the smaller details, such as the things that will go on top of the pot that will make it look as if there's food inside. The first thing that I kind of made was a tongue. And one thing that I didn't really concentrate on when I painted the tongue pieces, because I made two, the polystyrene texture, you know, that little circles things, kind of gave the tongue a tongue texture. So it looked more realistic than I thought it was going to look. The first tongue, which is this one, is a bit short and a bit stubby. So I did make another one, which is a lot more bigger. Well, not bigger, but it's longer. And to make it interesting, rather than having just a very long tongue, I decided to make it look as if it's hanging over the side of the pot. After both pieces of the tongue were done, I had to glue them together and then reshape them again to make sure that they looked right. I did some of the things off camera, so this is going to be a chicken feet, which I'm adding the nail that's sometimes on the back side of their feet onto the thing, again with hot glue. And as you can probably notice from the things that I've already made, the food that's going to be on the inside, or technically on top, is going to be quite interesting. Now that everything is built and everything is cut out, all that I really need to do, or the second last thing I need to do, is paint everything to make sure that it looks right and kind of like food or meat, if you will. I did also cut out small little cube shapes which I will make into vegetables, just to bring another color into the whole thing. As you can see, the thing that took most of my time painting it was this piece. I don't know why I struggled with it, but I really did struggle. I don't know why. The other pieces went a lot more quicker than that piece. And I did try to make them look a bit more realistic. They are obviously not realistic, as I'm still trying to figure out color theory and everything like that. And here are the things that I started painting that kind of made me laugh every time I tried painting it, which is eyes. It was very fun trying to paint them and trying to make them look semi-realistic, or just like you can know it. If you look at it, you know what it is. It was really fun adding all the details on them, and how I made sure that they dried and that they didn't roll over the wet paint was sticking them into pencils, which is like I made a holder out of that. Just to add a bit more detail to everything, I did add a bit of feathers to that chicken feet, which made it look a lot more interesting than it was. And obviously, if you had food like that, you would probably not have feathers on the chicken feet, but I wanted to make it look a bit more different. The second last thing that I'm going to paint is the top, and that is where I'm gonna put everything that I made on top of. I will say this process of painting the top and putting so much detail in it was kind of useless, because I added a thin layer of hot glue over all of this to make it look kind of like a watery substance, and it covered up most of the paint. So it was kind of useless to paint it this much detailed. Here you can see I'm painting a few pieces green, and that is the vegetable pieces that I talked about. And I just added vegetable pieces to make it kind of look a bit more less brown than what it was, because there was a lot of brown and blacks and it looked a bit colorless. So I had to add something that had a different color than everything else. After I painted that vegetable pieces, I started painting the tongue, which was by far the funnest thing to paint out of everything. I did add a bit of blue on the backside of the tongue to make it kind of look like veins. And it did look a bit strange, but I think it helped to make it look a bit more interesting and a bit more colorful. I did cut out and paint two macaroni pieces, and then I added a bit of red to make it look like veins on the eyes. And after everything that I painted and cut out, I finally could start adding everything with hot glue on top of the top. I will say adding everything on the top was by far the funnest process out of this whole project. And there was no order in which I placed the things. I just placed them as they looked okay or looked good. I did try to spread everything out to make sure that there were different colors of different things everywhere and equally spaced. I did notice that the hot glue gun that I used couldn't keep up with the amount of hot glue that had to come out of it because I wanted to do it quite quickly to make sure that there wasn't any weird lines between the other hot glue piece or hot glue that I put onto the thing. And there were definitely a few strange lines where the hot glue and the cold glue met between certain points. And after that, this project is done. It is finished and I really like how it came out. And here you can see what I meant with the hot glue covering up most of the paint that I did on that underside or on the top, which is sad, but at least you can see a bit of it. And here you can see how I did the whitewash, which just brings out that texture that I added on top of the thing with the toilet paper. Now that this thing is done, I thank you to those who have watched till the end, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and while you're down there, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to take care of yourself, drink water, and rest.